The night was calm but heavy with cold air. Soft city lights flickered across empty streets. Sandra Bullock sat in her car near the corner of a quiet road, waiting for the traffic light to turn green. She had just left an award dinner where cameras flashed and smiles felt endless. But now, away from the noise, silence wrapped around her like a blanket. She looked out of the window and saw something that made her pause. Under a weak streetlight stood a man in a gray hoodie, kneeling beside a homeless musician whose guitar lay broken on the sidewalk. The homeless man looked tired, his clothes worn and his face lined with the marks of too many hard nights. He sat silently watching the hooded man who gently turned the broken guitar in his hands. Sandra leaned forward, curious. The man's movements were slow and careful, almost loving, as if the old guitar was something sacred. She could hear faint words. He said, "Music should never stop because of broken strings." His voice was calm and kind. Sandra could not see his face, but something in his tone felt strangely familiar. Her curiosity grew stronger. The light turned green, but she didn't move. She watched as the hooded man opened a small pouch, took out some tools, and began fixing the guitar right there on the cold pavement. A few people passed by without stopping. Some even laughed softly, thinking it was strange. But the man stayed focused. When he finally tightened the last string, he smiled and handed the guitar back to the musician. Then he took off his jacket and placed it on the man's shoulders. "You'll need this more than I do," he said quietly. Sandra felt her heart pull. The musician's eyes filled with tears. He whispered, "Thank you, sir." The man just nodded and walked away, disappearing into the misty street. Sandra wanted to follow him, but the signal turned red again, trapping her in place. She sighed and finally drove home, her mind spinning with questions. Who was that man? And why did his voice sound so familiar? When she reached home, she made tea but couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. She remembered the soft way he had spoken, the kindness in his tone. It reminded her of someone she once knew, a friend who always said that fame means nothing if you can't help someone in need. She smiled a little, whispering to herself, "Keanu used to say that." Then she laughed quietly, shaking her head. It couldn't be him. Why would a global star like Keanu Reeves fix a broken guitar on a dark street? Still, the thought refused to leave her. The next morning, Sandra's phone buzzed with notifications. News sites and social media were full of a small story that was spreading fast. An unknown stranger repairs a homeless man's guitar and gives him his jacket. Someone had recorded it from a passing car. The clip showed only the man's back, but the way he knelt, the way he smiled before walking away, it looked almost poetic. Comments flooded in, calling him the Hooded Angel. People were touched, saying the world still had good souls. Sandra watched the clip again and again. Each time, her chest felt heavier. She knew that walk. She knew that quiet strength. She whispered again, "It really looks like him." That afternoon, she couldn't resist. She drove back to the same street where it happened. The sun was bright now, and the city noise had returned. But in that small corner, the world felt different. There he was, the same homeless musician sitting on a stool playing his guitar. The sound was beautiful, pure. The man smiled as people passed and dropped coins into his open case. Sandra stood at a distance, listening. When the song ended, she clapped softly. The musician looked up and nodded, recognizing the kindness in her face. She approached him gently. "Your music is beautiful," she said. He smiled shyly and replied, "Thank you, ma'am. A good man helped me fix this guitar last night. I thought it was gone forever, but he told me that music must never sleep. He was like an angel." His words made her heart tremble. She looked closer at the guitar, at the way the light touched it, and then she saw something small carved near the neck of the instrument. 3 letters, Kira and a number. Her breath caught. Car, 1997. That was the year they had filmed Speed. She stared at it for a moment, unable to speak. The musician noticed her expression. "Is something wrong, ma'am?" he asked softly. Sandra forced a small smile. "No," she said. "Just thinking how lucky you are to have met someone like that." She dropped a folded bill into his case and turned away before her emotions showed. As she walked back to her car, her mind raced. "Car, that can't be a coincidence," she whispered. "Keanu Reeves, what are you hiding?" That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying memories of him. his quiet nature on set, the way he always helped crew members, the stories she had heard over the years of his random acts of kindness. Everything seemed to connect now. She opened her laptop and watched the viral video again, freezing each frame. The man's height, his walk, his hands, it all matched. She closed the laptop slowly and smiled with disbelief. "You never changed," she murmured. "You just got better at hiding it." But a question remained. Why was he helping that specific man? What was their connection? The thought haunted her like a gentle whisper in her ear. She knew she had to ask him, not as a co-star, not as a celebrity, but as an old friend who still believed in the power of quiet goodness. The next evening, she called him. His voice over the phone was calm, warm, and slightly surprised to hear from her. "Hey, Sandra," he said. "Long time no talk." She smiled softly. "Yeah, too long," she replied. After a few moments of casual talk, she asked, "Were you downtown last night?" There was a small silence on the other end. He chuckled lightly. "I go there sometimes," he said. "Why do you ask?" Her heart beat faster. She wanted to press him, but chose silence instead. "No reason," she said. "Just curious." When the call ended, she sat still, staring at the city lights outside her window. She could feel it deep inside. He was the man from that night. But she also knew Keanu. If he did something kind, he would never speak about it. That was who he was. She whispered to herself, "Then I'll find out in my own way." And as the night deepened, she decided she would visit him soon, not as an actress, but as a friend who wanted to understand what kindness truly looked like when no one was watching. The next morning, sunlight spilled through Sandra's window, but her thoughts were already elsewhere. She kept thinking about the man with the guitar, about the small letters carved into the wood, and about Keanu's calm voice over the phone. Something inside her refused to rest until she understood the full story. She wanted to know who that homeless musician really was, and what connection tied him to Keanu. After breakfast, she dressed simply, wearing a hoodie and cap to blend in. She didn't want anyone to recognize her. She drove back to the same street corner and parked nearby. The musician was there again, playing softly under the shade of an old tree. His song filled the air with quiet sadness, like a memory that refused to fade. Sandra waited until the crowd thinned before walking closer. "Hello again," she said gently. He smiled when he saw her. "You came back," he said. "That means a lot. Your song is beautiful," she replied. "May I sit?" "Of course, ma'am," he said. She sat on the pavement beside him, her eyes following his hands as they moved over the strings. They were rough and scarred, but full of grace. "You play with so much feeling," Sandra said softly. "Did you always love music?" The man nodded. "Music kept me alive," he said. "There was a time I used to play for small movies, background tunes, teaching kids guitar in a tiny studio. It wasn't much, but it was my world." "What happened?" she asked, his eyes clouded. "Life," he said quietly. "My wife fell sick. I sold everything to save her, but she didn't make it. I lost my home, then my job, then my will. People I thought were friends forgot me, but one man didn't." Her heart skipped. "One man?" The musician nodded, smiling faintly. "A kind young actor. I helped him once when he couldn't pay for lessons. He said he wanted to learn how to feel the guitar, not just play it. I taught him for a few months before he left for a big movie role. He was humble, soft-spoken, always thanked me after every class." Sandra listened closely. Her chest tightened. "What was his name?" she asked, pretending not to know. The man laughed softly. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," he said. "Try me," she whispered. He looked at the guitar and smiled with pride. "Keanu Reeves," he said simply. The sound of his name hung in the air. Sandra froze. Part of her wanted to smile, part of her wanted to cry. "So it's true," she said quietly. The man nodded. "He disappeared after his movie became famous. I didn't expect to see him again. But one night, years later, he came back here. I was sitting right on this same spot, hungry and lost. He sat next to me, no cameras, no crew, just him. He said, 'You once helped me find music. Now let me help you find it again.' Since then, he visits every few weeks. Sometimes he brings food, sometimes strings, sometimes just peace." Sandra felt her throat tighten. Her eyes began to sting. "That's beautiful," she whispered. The musician smiled softly. The world thinks fame changes people, but he's proof it doesn't have to. He never wanted credit. I tried to thank him once in front of a crowd, and he just said, "Music is thanks enough?" A tear slipped down Sandra's cheek before she could stop it. She looked away quickly. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "He's lucky to have met someone like you." The musician looked down and strummed a slow tune. "No," he said softly. "I'm the lucky one. Not everyone gets a friend who remembers their kindness." That evening, Sandra sat in her garden, watching the sunset. She kept hearing the musician's voice in her mind. He came back here. The thought filled her with warmth and sadness at the same time. She remembered the early days of her friendship with Keanu. He was always different from others in Hollywood. Humble, kind, quiet, and never distracted by fame. Now she understood that he hadn't just stayed that way. He had grown even kinder. She picked up her phone and texted him. "Hey, are you home? I need to talk." His reply came quickly. "Sure, come by if you want." As she drove to his place, her heart beat faster. She wasn't angry or shocked anymore. She was deeply moved. She wanted to tell him she knew. She wanted to thank him for reminding her what real kindness looked like. Keanu's house was simple and peaceful. No big gates, no heavy guards, just a small garden filled with plants and the smell of coffee from inside. He opened the door before she could knock, smiling softly. "Hey, Sandra," he said. "You look serious. Everything okay?" She stepped inside. "I went to the street," she said quietly. "I met him." His smile faded slightly, but his eyes stayed calm. "You did?" "Yes," she said. "He told me everything." He didn't speak for a moment. Then he sighed. "I didn't mean for you to find out," he said softly. "It's not something I wanted to make public." "Why?" she asked. "People should know the kind of person you are." He shook his head. "If kindness needs to be seen, it becomes a performance," he said. "And that's not kindness anymore." His words hit her heart. She looked at him, remembering how many times he had said similar things years ago. She felt her eyes grow wet. "You never changed," she said. "You just got quieter about it." He smiled. "The world's loud enough already," he said. They sat down together on his porch. The sound of distant traffic faded behind the soft chirping of crickets. Sandra looked at him for a long moment and said, "He said you helped him find music again." Keanu nodded. "He helped me first," he said. "When I was struggling, when I doubted myself, he told me once, 'You don't need to be perfect. Just be kind to the sound and it will be kind to you.' I never forgot that. When I saw him again after all those years, he didn't recognize me at first, but I recognized him instantly. I just wanted him to feel that someone still cared." Sandra's voice trembled. "You didn't just fix his guitar, Keanu. You fixed something inside him." He looked down at his hands, quiet for a moment. "We all break sometimes," he said. "If we can help one person pick up their pieces, that's enough." The night deepened around them, but the silence was peaceful. Sandra looked at the man she had known for decades, and for the first time in years, she felt truly inspired. She smiled gently and said, "Then let me help you next time, not for the cameras, for the kindness." Keanu looked at her with soft eyes. "That would mean a lot," he said. As the stars appeared above them, Sandra knew she had found something greater than a story. She had found a truth, a reminder that even in a world full of noise, silent kindness could still create the most beautiful music of all. The next morning, Keanu woke before sunrise. His home was quiet except for the soft hum of the city in the distance. He sat by the window with a cup of black coffee, staring at the light creeping over the rooftops. The world was still, but inside him there was a storm of memories. He thought of the man on the street, the one who had once believed in him when nobody else did. He thought of how small acts of kindness could change the course of a life. His phone buzzed, a message from Sandra. "Can we meet the musician together today? I want to help too." He smiled slightly. Her words were simple, but he could feel the warmth behind them. He typed back, "Yes, let's go this evening." He'll like that. As the day went on, Keanu finished some work calls and then drove to a small music store. He bought a set of new guitar strings, a tuner, and a soft black case. He wanted to surprise his old teacher with something that would last. As he left the store, the owner stopped him. "You still helping the folks out there, Keanu?" he asked with a grin. Keanu smiled softly. "Just trying to return the sound that once helped me," he said quietly, and walked away. By evening, the sky had turned golden. Sandra waited near the same corner where they had first seen the musician. She wore simple clothes again, just like him. Not as celebrities, but as people who wanted to listen. When Keanu arrived, the musician was already playing. His fingers danced on the strings, creating a tune that was full of emotion. People stopped to listen, their faces calm, their eyes softened by the sound. When the song ended, Keanu walked closer. The musician looked up, blinking in disbelief. For a moment, he was speechless. Then his face broke into a trembling smile. "You came back," he whispered. Keanu knelt beside him. "Always," he said softly. He handed him the new guitar case. "For your music," he said. The man opened it with shaking hands, his eyes filling with tears. "This is too much," he said. Keanu smiled. "You gave me everything when I had nothing. It's not enough to repay that." The musician wiped his eyes. "You were just a kid back then," he said, laughing gently. "I remember how your fingers hurt from the strings, but you never gave up." Sandra stepped forward quietly. "He still doesn't give up," she said warmly. The musician turned to her, surprised. "You're Sandra Bullock," he said softly. "You two worked together, didn't you?" "Yes," she said. "And he still surprises me after all these years." The musician smiled wider now, though his tears still glistened. "I don't know what to say." Keanu shook his head. "Say nothing," he replied. "Just play." So the man lifted the guitar and began to strum. The tune was slow and full of memory. It told a story without words, a story of nights under the stars, of hope lost and found, of friendship that outlasted time. Sandra listened with her hands clasped together, her heart heavy with emotion. As the last note faded, silence filled the air. The small crowd watching clapped softly, moved by the unseen story behind the melody. The musician looked at Keanu and said quietly, "This song is called Strings of Kindness. I wrote it for people who give without asking." Keanu's eyes lowered. Sandra whispered, "It's beautiful." The man smiled. "Music is the only thing I have left to give. When I play, I feel alive again." Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You have more than music," he said. "You have a soul that never gave up. That's what the world needs to hear." As the evening light faded, they sat together on the pavement, talking like old friends. The musician shared stories of his youth, of the dreams he once had, and how he used to play in small bars hoping someone would notice. Sandra asked softly, "If you could wish for one thing right now, what would it be?" The musician thought for a moment. "A place to play without fear of being chased away," he said. "Somewhere I could teach again. I used to teach kids. I miss that." Keanu looked at Sandra. She nodded silently. They didn't need words. The idea had already formed in their minds, a place where music and kindness could meet again. When they finally stood up to leave, the musician tried to give the guitar case back. "Please, I can't take this," he said. Keanu gently closed it in his hands. "Then don't take it," he said softly. "Keep it for the next song you teach someone." The man's lip trembled. "You've given me back my life," he whispered. Keanu smiled faintly. "You once did the same for me." That night, as Sandra and Keanu walked back to their cars, the sound of the man's music followed them down the street. Sandra stopped for a moment and said, "You know, people think of you as a movie hero, but this is who you really are, isn't it?" Keanu looked at her quietly. "We all have heroes inside us," he said. "Most just forget to look." Her voice softened. "Then maybe it's time the world sees the real story, the one without lights and cameras." He shook his head gently. "No, Sandra. Let the story belong to him. Let the world remember the sound, not the face." She nodded slowly, understanding. In that silence, she realized something profound. The greatest kindness is not the one that gets applause. It's the one that heals quietly in the dark. The next day, while filming on set, Sandra couldn't focus. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the street, to the old man's trembling hands and the way Keanu had knelt beside him like a student again. She decided she wouldn't let this end there. She called her assistant and said, "Find me every music foundation that helps street performers. I have an idea." She smiled to herself as she hung up. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement waiting to be born. A movement that began with one broken guitar and a quiet act of kindness. The morning sun poured softly through Sandra's curtains, but her thoughts were already far away. She couldn't forget the sound of the street musician's song or the quiet look in Keanu's eyes that night. There was something sacred in that moment, something she couldn't let fade away. She decided it was time to turn that moment of kindness into something lasting. She called her assistant early. "I need help," she said. "Find local shelters and small art programs that support musicians who lost their homes or jobs. And find out if there's any way we can build something new for them." Her assistant sounded confused. "A project?" "No," Sandra said softly. "A promise." Meanwhile, Keanu spent his morning fixing an old motorcycle in his garage. The sound of metal and oil usually calmed him, but today he kept thinking about the musician's wish, a place where he could play and teach again. He remembered the man's voice saying, "Music kept me alive." Keanu smiled to himself and whispered, "Then we'll keep it alive for you." That afternoon, Sandra called him. "Can you meet me at the studio at 5?" she asked. "I have an idea." "Sure," he said. "What kind of idea?" She laughed. "The kind that might make you proud." When he arrived at her studio, she was sitting with sketches spread across the table. Drawings of a small, open-air music corner with benches, soft lights, and a sign that read, "Strings of Kindness." She looked up at him and smiled. "I want to build this for him," she said. "A place where anyone can play, no matter who they are. No money, no judgment, just music and respect." Keanu stared at the sketches for a long moment, his face calm but his eyes full of emotion. "That's beautiful," he said quietly. "It was your act that started it," she said. "You repaired his strings, but maybe we can repair more than that." He nodded slowly. "We can do it together." They spent the next few days visiting small neighborhoods, looking for the perfect spot. After many visits, they found it. A quiet park near the edge of the city, surrounded by trees, with enough space for music to fill the air without disturbing anyone. Keanu stood in the middle of the park and closed his eyes. "It sounds right," he said softly. A few days later, they returned to the same street where the musician played. The man was there again, singing to a small group of strangers. Sandra waited until he finished, then stepped forward. "We have something to show you," she said gently. He smiled, confused. "Me?" Keanu nodded. "Come with us." They walked together to the park. When the musician saw the empty space with a small wooden sign that read "Reserved for Music," he stopped walking. "What is this?" he asked. Sandra smiled. "Your new stage," she said. The man's mouth fell open. "No, this can't be for me." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's for everyone who needs to believe again," he said. "But it starts with you." The musician's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you," he whispered. "Don't," Keanu said softly. "Just play." So he did. He took out his guitar and played the first song he had ever taught Keanu years ago, the same tune he had once used to teach him patience and rhythm. Sandra sat on a bench listening, her hands clasped together, her eyes shining with emotion. As the sound filled the park, people began to stop and gather. Families walking their dogs, children holding balloons, even strangers on bicycles, all stopped to listen. Some sat down quietly. Others dropped coins in his open case. By the time the song ended, the crowd clapped and cheered. The musician looked at Keanu and said, "This is the first time I've played without fear in years." Sandra smiled through her tears. "And it won't be the last." As the sun began to set, they stayed together under the orange sky, the air filled with laughter and hope. Sandra whispered, "We should make this official. We could start a foundation, something small but meaningful. We can call it the Strings of Kindness Project." Keanu looked at her thoughtfully. "I like that," he said. "A project born from silence and love." The next week, the small park became a place of light. Volunteers helped decorate it with soft lamps, benches, and posters inviting people to come and play. Street artists painted a mural of hands holding a glowing guitar with the words, "Kindness never goes out of tune." Soon, local news began to notice. Stories spread about how two famous actors had quietly built a space for forgotten musicians. But both Sandra and Keanu avoided interviews. When asked, they simply said, "It wasn't us. It was the music." A few nights later, Sandra visited the park alone. The lamps glowed softly in the dark. The musician was there, teaching two children how to hold a guitar. His voice was gentle, his smile full of peace. She watched from afar, tears in her eyes, realizing that this was what kindness truly looked like: quiet, patient, and endless. As she turned to leave, she saw Keanu walking toward her with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and smiled. "You couldn't stay away either?" he asked. She laughed softly. "No, I just wanted to see if it's real." "It's more than real," he said. "It's alive." They stood together under the soft park lights, listening to the laughter of children and the faint hum of music. For a moment, the world felt healed. Then the musician's song changed. Slow, emotional, deep. It was something new. Something that felt like a memory being reborn. Keanu frowned slightly. "I know this tune," he said. Sandra looked at him. "From where?" He stared at the man and whispered, "I think it was my mother's favorite lullaby." Sandra's eyes widened. "How would he know that?" Keanu didn't answer. His heart started to beat faster. The realization began to form in his mind, a memory he had forgotten long ago. The suspense deepened in the air as the song played on, each note pulling him closer to something buried in his past. The night suddenly felt full of secrets waiting to be revealed. Keanu stood frozen as the soft tune filled the park. Every note echoed in his chest like a heartbeat from another time. Sandra watched him closely. "What's wrong?" she whispered. He didn't answer at first. His eyes stayed locked on the musician. "That song," he said quietly, "my mother used to sing it to me when I was a child. I haven't heard it in decades." The musician finished the melody and looked up, smiling softly. "Did you like it?" he asked. Keanu stepped closer. "Where did you learn that song?" The man blinked. "A woman taught it to me long ago," he said. "She came to one of my lessons when I was young. She said she wanted to learn it for her son, Keanu." Sandra gasped. Keanu's breath caught. "You knew her?" he whispered. The musician nodded. "She was kind, gentle, and proud of you. She said music helped you feel safe." Emotion hit Keanu like a wave. His eyes filled as he knelt beside the man. "She was my mother," he said softly. "You were her teacher." The crowd around them fell silent. The truth hung in the air, glowing like the lamps in the park. Sandra covered her mouth, tears running down her cheeks. The musician's voice trembled. Then this park, this music, this kindness, it all came full circle. Keanu smiled through his tears. "You didn't just teach me. You taught my mother. You gave us both peace." The man reached out, placing a trembling hand over Keanu's. "And now you've given it back to me." As the night deepened, the three of them sat quietly, surrounded by music and light. The park that was once empty now held a story of kindness returning home. The next morning, sunlight touched the new park with a golden glow. Dew sparkled on the benches, and birds sang softly in the trees. Keanu arrived early, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. Sandra joined him a few minutes later with 2 cups of coffee. The air was peaceful, yet heavy with emotion after the night before. The musician was already there, sitting on the small stage, quietly tuning his guitar. When he saw them, he smiled warmly. "Good morning," he said. "I didn't sleep much last night. My heart was too full." Keanu smiled back. "Mine too," he said softly. They sat together on the bench. The musician placed his hand on the guitar and looked at Keanu. "Your mother was one of the kindest souls I ever met," he said. "When she came to me all those years ago, she said she wanted to learn one song that could calm your fears." "I never forgot her words," she said. "If one day my son feels lost, may this melody guide him home." Tears filled Keanu's eyes. He took a deep breath and whispered, "She did guide me home." "Right here." Sandra looked at both men, her heart heavy but glowing with pride. "She would be so proud of what you've done," she said gently. "This park, this kindness, it's her song now." The musician nodded slowly. and it will keep playing long after we're gone. That evening, they held a small event to celebrate the opening of the Strings of Kindness Park. There were no red carpets, no cameras, no famous faces, just people from every walk of life, holding candles and listening to music. Children danced near the benches, elders smiled, and the soft sound of guitars filled the air. When the musician stepped onto the small stage, he said, "This song belongs to everyone who believes that kindness never dies." He began to play the same lullaby that had connected their lives. Keanu joined in, strumming softly beside him, his hands steady and his heart light. Sandra stood among the crowd, tears glistening in her eyes. She whispered to herself, "This is what real success looks like." As the song ended, the audience fell silent. Then a gentle wind swept through the park, carrying the music's echo into the night sky. It felt like a blessing from somewhere beyond. The musician turned to Keanu and said, "Thank you for remembering me." Keanu shook his head with a soft smile. "No," he said. "Thank you for reminding me who I am." They hugged quietly, the kind of embrace that heals without words. Sandra stepped forward and placed her hand on both their shoulders. "You both taught the world something tonight," she said. "That kindness always finds its way back home." As the lamps glowed brighter and the park shimmered under the stars, Keanu looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mom, your song still lives." The screen of the world seemed to fade into that moment. Two friends, a teacher and a melody born from kindness. No fame, no spotlight, just love returning to where it began. And from that day forward, the Strings of Kindness Park became a living symbol of hope. People from everywhere came to play, share, and heal. Every evening, the same tune drifted through the air, a song that had once connected a mother, her son, and a humble musician. It became known as the song that never ended, because kindness once given always finds its echo,